Austrian farmer Franz Jägerstätter faces the threat of execution for refusing to fight the Nazis during World War II. A Hidden Life was directed by Terrence Malick in 2019, and I'm super pumped to have my good friend Logan Bonjean here to review it with me. Logan, I can't think of a better person to have a discourse about this film because specifically it's in your top 4 on Letterboxd. I know you've recommended it to me before, and I finally got around to watching it, and I just want to hear some initial thoughts from you on A Hidden Life. We'll walk through kind of the plot and themes and things that worked really well for me and for you, and things that might not have worked, and then we'll just give our final thoughts. So, is that cool with you?
Sounds good, dude. Pumped to be here.
Yeah, man. So tell me just like some initial thoughts or things that come to mind when you think of Hidden Life. I want to hear just like how it's personally impacted you.
Yeah, you mentioned it's in my Letterboxd top 4. I think it might have gotten bumped recently for another film, but it's like always in my top 10 when I tell people, top 10 favorite movies. A Hidden Life always shows up. Just really love Terrence Malick. Have always loved his full canon of films ever since being in film school back in college. Part of it has to do with me being a believer and like a follower of Jesus, and Terrence Malick exploring themes of faith in all of his movies, whether overt or less overt. And yeah, obviously this movie is a lot more overt. And I'm just drawn to it for the story cinematically. It's definitely very long, very slow, but very beautiful. So those are usually the 3 things that I tell people when I recommend the movie is like, heads up, super long, super slow, but really, really beautiful. So yeah, excited to chat about it.
The few things that I took away about what the general audience is going to think about this film is literally that. Something you mentioned is Malick's previous discography, and you kind of know what you're getting into in his themes and the way that he shoots things. For me, I've only seen Tree of Life, and it was years and years ago. So I'm pretty removed from his style. Coming into this film, it was a breath of fresh air to me. And I honestly, my jaw was on the floor just looking at some of the sequences. I wanted to see if you could just kind of unpack, just for the people listening, like general plot here before we get into anything else.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Malick's filmmaking goes, it's very like stream of consciousness style. It's very like when you see a Malick film, you know it's a Malick film, which you could say that for a lot of people, but for him, it's like really distinct because his filmmaking is super unique. He's using really wide lenses on really close-up shots. He has his DPs operating their cameras on steady cams, and there's like very minimal equipment on set. So I've like even listened to interviews with actors who have acted in Malick's films before, and the way they describe the camera is as if it's like almost another character in the story, which I think is really cool. So you feel like you're a part of what they're going through you're kind of following the camera around as they're grappling with this really just like impossible situation that they're thrust into. We can get into the story behind it, but Malick wanted to make this story about a real person that really lived during World War II. And it's just really heartbreaking. And and again, as like a follower of Jesus, like as a believer, you like run through the hypotheticals in your head of like what would happen if I was put into a situation like this where I like cannot co-sign something because of my faith, but if I say no to this thing, it's definitely leading to my death. It might lead to the death or harm of people that I love. And Malick just wrestles with these really deep themes of like, does this even matter? Like for a guy, this like no-name Austrian farmer, does his like death and his martyrdom mean anything? And that's like kind of the question. That's like the idea behind A Hidden Life, like literally in the title. But it's like, does this like insignificant man's quote unquote hidden life and his martyrdom and death, like, does it mean anything in the grand scheme of things? And that's kind of the theme that Malick's wrestling with, which plays out really agonizingly and beautifully. And we can get into like some more things that he's doing cinematically.
It's heavy.
It's super heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it kept coming up throughout the film, but you have several characters. I think it's, his local bishop, his mayor, what is your decision? How is it going to change anything? In fact, even I think it's like a Nazi general at some point is like, you're replaceable. Like your death means nothing. Your stance means nothing and changes nothing. And that is just that question and that statement is constantly put to the test. And it's kind of true. It's like the sad reality is it doesn't change the course of the war. It doesn't change the course of the tragedies that are happening in Europe in the era, because of the war. But the reality of his story is that it's going to echo through eternity, right? And it's a story that's worth being told and still being told today, even though Franz did nothing. And that's the point. He did nothing. He didn't salute to Hitler, and he didn't, even against his will, join the regime. He rejected it the entire time. And it's that story, that stance that has echoed through the church today. Okay, now Logan has his AirPods in so that we can have just some back and forth banter during conversation. Not have any frequency or bad sound or anything like that. But I wanted to just kind of dive into the themes. There's a few themes that stick out here, but one that is just blanketly told to the camera is a line thrown at the end of the film was, "It is better to suffer injustice than to do it." And that's Franz's whole mentality here. He's willing to go through the suffrage. He's willing to sacrifice his reputation, his life, his time with family, than to create injustice in the world and to bring that upon others. The man's conviction is it is like a death-defying conviction. I thought that was beautifully explored here. I mean, you feel the tragedy of what he's going through. You're put through the ringer emotionally of what he's having to give up, to sacrifice, to stick to his morals, to stick to his guns, and not give in like the rest of the world during this time.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it a minute ago, but it's like he is thinking eternally more than temporally, because if you're like making decisions for right here, right now, you'd never do something like this. Like, you would just concede and do what you need to do to stay alive. But yeah, for Franz, his whole mentality was, because of his faith in God, it was like, I cannot in good conscience and in clear conscience like do these things that I'm being asked to do and serve this man that I'm being asked to serve. Like, he literally views him as the Antichrist in the movie. He like calls him Adolf Hitler multiple times. And it's like, yeah, that's it. I love when Malick does this. And obviously, again, this is based on true story, so it's like all that much more fascinating and agonizing and beautiful. But like, he's exploring the life of this, like I said, like nothing, nobody, farmer in like rural Austria. But at the same time as he's like tracking with this man's life, he's exploring these super big, deep, profound questions and themes and ideas behind life and death and faith and morality. And that's something that like Malick does as good as anybody, I think, when it comes to filmmaking.
So good. Yeah, it is. It's amazing, really, what he does. And specifically, like, I kind of wanted to talk about stylistically some of the choices that he decided to make. I think for me, like, what just leaps and jumps off the screen as kind of a new Malick consumer, right, or a new fan of his work, is the wide angles. You touched on it a little earlier, but I kind of want to allow you to get into the weeds about the cinematography and just the things that he does stylistically there. But and also just the editing is linear, but he uses jump cuts like shamelessly. He doesn't hide things. He'll skip time, that kind of thing. And I think it just works beautifully. Stylistically here, you just melt into this world. And production design is something in and of itself. You genuinely feel like it's 1942 and you are in Austria. And I watched it at my parents' house. My mom came in and watched the first 30 minutes of the film with me. She joined in. My dad came in the back 30, 40 minutes, and both of them were just blown away. They were like, how did they get that shot? And my dad comes in on the scene where Franz is going on the train and he's leaving his wife. Basically, he was blown away. I wanted to just let you unpack that and talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to dive into like Malick's full canon and watch all of his films, because he like I said, definitely has a style, and it's on full display here. And actually, it's kind of cool. His DP on A Hidden Life was a cam op on a bunch of movies previous, but his usual DP in a lot of his movies before, like Tree of Life, Chivo is what they call him, wasn't even the DP on this movie. But it was cool to see, Malik's style still. So like a lot of different things. Relatively new DP on this movie, and this was the first movie that Malik had ever shot digital. Like he had always shot his films on film, pretty much start to finish. So this is his first ever film shot digitally from start to finish. They shot it on a couple of red Epic Dragons, which you could buy one on eBay right now for like $2,000, which is kind of crazy.
I know, that's insane.
And they shot on ARRI Master Primes, which are like crazy awesome lenses. And it was funny. I listened to an interview with the DP, and he said that they mainly shot on the 12 millimeter, which, if you know anything about lenses, that's so wide.
Yes.
Like really
that's
wide.
That's what I was guessing. That's the focal length I was guessing that it was.
Yeah. And in the interview, he's like, our longer lens was a 16 millimeter, which is still insanely wide. So, it's lots of wide angles, but like really
and
tight
that's full
close
frame
up to
as
the
well.
subject. Yeah, full frame. So.
Oh my gosh.
It's.
I noticed there's some times where he goes in for a close up, right? But you're using a wide angle, and the camera is like literally like next to their elbow, and I'm trying to explain to my mom like while she's there, I'm like, you know how far the lens is from that guy's elbow? Like it is maybe 3 inches from his elbow, and you're seeing this whole picture, and man, it's unique. It's beautiful. You're not going to see it anywhere else, but I'm thankful to be a part of it.
There's some BTS of another one of Malik's films, Night of Cups, and Christian Bale's in that movie, and the cam op is on a steady cam with the camera, and they are like inches away from his face, like shooting the shot. And totally. But again, like those actors have said in interviews, like the camera becomes an actor in the movie, and it becomes a part of the story, and it's just interesting how they filmed the movie. Like lots of natural light, letting the sun kind of guide when they were shooting and how they were producing. It just very minimal, like a steady cam and some tripods and maybe a slider here or there and just a couple of cameras and a couple lenses. What you touched on is like the production design and the set design and the costumes and the acting. And that's like one of the things that Malik is big about is like, I'm going to just create space for these actors to do their thing. And A Hidden Life is a great example of that, like going for crazy long takes and stuff that's not even in the script and just letting things unfold and play out.
Truly.
That ends up in the final cut because it's natural and beautiful. And I would be fascinated to know what percentage of movies like this that Malik creates, like what ends up in the final cut that wasn't in the original script, whether it's just a glance or a look or just an extra interaction. It makes for some really cool films.
I wish the guy had interviews. I wish that he had behind the scenes.
We should get into Malik the character because he's just like
he's a ghost.
He's very mysterious. Yeah, very, very mysterious.
He's such a ghost, man. I'm like, I want to know. There's a shot in the film, and it's about the time where he's talking to his local bishop. They're outside of the church. He's talking to, I can't remember if it's a priest or a painter or something, but it's a guy who's painting iconography of Christ, and they're talking about that and what that means. And there's a shot, and it's basically of Franz's neck, and it's just like chest up to chin. And Jenna even pointed out, she's like, oh, that's so interesting. That's weird, but interesting. You know, she says something like that, and I'm like, how do you pick that? How do you pick to cut that in the film? You know, and to create, and it creates feeling. Even that one shot, few seconds of a dude's neck. It's like it just creates this feeling of you're removed from normalcy, you know, in that moment and in that conversation. And I'm like, that's what I would be asking Malik is like, you know, I know you have to cut out so much because you film so much and we need to reduce this to 2:45 or 3 hours or whatever. But how do you also choose what goes in? That's what I'm wondering when going through it.
Malik is always trying to like place his characters in their environment and make you feel them in their environment. So like even when he gets really close up shots, you'll notice that you can still place the character in their environment. And I think that's something that's really important to him is like everything is an exploration of, because like a lot of times when you use a really long lens, you can almost like remove a character from their environment completely. But yeah, Malick using these really wide lenses, even if it's really close up and visceral and like you're right there in whoever's face, you're still placing them in their environment. And yeah, I think he's consciously doing that all the time in his movies.
I love it. Something that I think jumped off the screen at me when going through the film was the iconography behind the nature itself and the use of nature and choosing what to show and what not to show. This tension is boiling when Franz knows I could be called up, I could be called up, I could be called up. And then there's a personification there when the rolling of cloudy, rainy clouds can come over these Austrian mountains, and it just communicates darkness is looming. Yep. The darkness of the regime is approaching. The darkness of the war effort, being on the wrong side of the war effort, is coming into Franz's life and subsequently the life of his family, and just taking, the stability apart. And I was blown away by the use of nature. He doesn't just, I feel like a film that it reminds me of as well is Alejandro Inarritu's The Revenant, right? Mm-hmm. Where Alejandro uses the camera and you get these really long, to the average moviegoer, it's probably pointless or it's probably a boring looking shot, but you get a long take of snow dripping off of a tree or whatever, and nature, the iconography of the nature is used to tell the story. And in the same way, Malick uses the Austrian mountains and the farm grass and different things to show different seasons or to show what they're feeling, or how they're hurting or whatever, and masterfully done.
It's funny you bring up The Revenant. I don't know if you knew this, but Chivo, Terrence Malick's typical DP on a lot of his movies, was the DP on The Revenant. So very very similar style,
very on par, man.
Yeah,
it totally makes sense. Like I'm surprised, but I'm also not surprised at the same time. So we could just kind of jump into, I feel like we've said a lot of high notes, we've given a lot of praise, but we've gotten into the little weeds, into the technicals. Let's just talk about high notes. I mean, what specifically works for you, Logan, in this film, and just what's praiseworthy?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's praiseworthy, stuff that we've already touched on. The cinematography, again, thrusting you into this environment, and it's not just the cinematography, it's the set design, it's the production design, it's the costumes, it's everything. Like you mentioned, that it makes you feel like you're thrust into 1940s Austria or whenever the exact time is. Like you feel like you're in this whole different world. The actors are amazing. Again, Malick does such an excellent job of just letting the actors act and basically saying hey man, run it, do your thing. Yeah, just some incredible acting. You feel really deeply. We'll get to low notes. This is something that I like about Malick, but it's something that frustrates people about Malick, is that there's not a lot of hand-holding that goes on with his films. It forces the viewer to think a little more critically and to buy into what he's trying to do. You don't even see the execution at the end of this movie. When Franz does finally go to the guillotine, you don't watch it happen. You just see the curtain close. And
how did you feel about that storytelling choice?
Yeah, it's
to withhold that from us.
If you have seen Malick's films, you kind of probably figure that that's how things are going to end, that you're not going to actually get to see the final culmination, the execution. But I think Malick is always doing stuff like that intentionally to, make you, to draw you into this story and make you feel things and infer things based on what you've been seeing. And the point of the movie isn't that execution scene. A lot of times the climax of a movie, that's the whole point. That's what we've been building to. But when Malick's doing these things and he's digging into deeper themes, the point isn't the execution itself. The point is the meaning behind all of it. So I think that was a very conscious decision that he made to not show the actual execution, because it's not the point of the movie. So again, that would frustrate a lot of people, understandably so. But yeah.
where I'm placed as the viewer, audience member, emotionally, whenever you see the execution about to happen, we are led up to the point, but then we're not given that kind of release. You feel like Fanny, his wife, because that's exactly what she went through. She knows that his death is inevitable, and then the church bells and the letter is given. The church bells happen, the letter is given, and it's like, I can't visually see it in my mind, but I just know that it happened. And even like, it's kind of a little bit of that showing a little bit, but letting the imagination fill the gaps. That is even more powerful of a storytelling technique than actually showing the act itself. And I feel like that works, This ain't no John Carpenter movie, We're not showing body parts flying around or anything. Like, this is a different kind of film communicating a different message, and we're not allowed to have just that kind of visuals given to us, because that's not the thing that needs to be reflected on when the credits roll. So I thought it was brilliant, and I was thankful that he made that creative decision to not go into the execution visually. So we know it happens. It's there cinematically, but it's like, you don't have to show the beheading.
Yeah, I don't even think it would work with the stream of consciousness that had been building up through the entire movie to that point. Like, it would have thrown you out of everything that Malick had been trying to usher you into throughout the entire movie.
Totally.
So, yeah, I agree with the choice, but can also see how that would frustrate people to be like, okay, like, where's the closure on this?
Why didn't it? Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. This might be a really short part of this discussion, but James Newton Howard's score for this film, it is light, it is joyful, it is beautiful. I think it captures the way that they weave it in and throughout, just some of the movement of him and his relationship with Fanny and their life in Austria is gorgeous. But I think the detriment is that main theme and that score, it doesn't actually align or aid the tragedy that is happening. It's actually like ironic that the score is the score. And it's a score that I will count as memorable. It's already on my playlist. I'm already listening to it when I'm studying and reading. And I love it. Personally, I love it. But, when I think of the score, I'm thinking of him riding on a motorcycle through the hills of Austria, or him hanging out at the town square having brews with his boys and the mayor, and it's more of the happier notes and not the actual tragedy that is the plot of this film.
Like, you alluded to the weather even changing earlier in the movie, how like there's this shift from bright, sunny, beautiful Austrian countryside to the weather shifts and things get dark, and you feel that darkness obviously in the story, but it's reflected in the environment too. And I do think there are points too with the score where there are shifts from like light, airy, like showing him like laying with his bride in the Austrian countryside, and I'm like, dude, do I want to move to Austria like tomorrow? And but then shifting into that more somber, again, like, that's the beauty of movies, is that there's the cinematography, there's the set design, the production design, the costumes, there's the score, like all of these forces kind of moving together, which is why we love movies so much. It like makes you feel things and experience things, and it generates memories, and all of these things are working in tandem with each other to make you feel something, make you wrestle with ideas, and the score is a huge part of that too. So, but I can see what you're saying of like,
that's so good.
All right, like we should probably like bring down the mood, just like the weather comes down, and as the tone gets darker, maybe reflect it with the score. But maybe getting into like some of the low points is like, this is not your typical like thriller or drama or war movie. Like, it is a very slow burn, very slow march to this insignificant man's insignificant death. And there's not like some dramatic violins in the score. There's not some like dramatic shifts or blood or gore or what. Like, you just, it's a very slow simmer, slow burn, slow march throughout the movie, which again, a lot of people aren't a fan of and can't sit through. And I will say this is not the most rewatchable movie in the world, even for me who like
No,
loves it and adores
not.
it. I'm like, I revisit it like maybe once a year, but even then it's like, it's just long and
I
agonizing and yeah, not super
yeah.
rewatchable.
Yeah, it's not. It's not rewatchable. I don't think I'll even visit it once a year. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that it's not amazing. So, lots of amazing, near perfect films out there in the world that are very low on the rewatchability scale.
Yeah.
So, a high note for me is Malik's use of voiceover, especially early on. And when Fanny, his wife, is reading her words of their life in Austria, and she's writing letters to him, and then he is writing letters back to her, and you hear the words that they've written to each other, but what's being shown is not necessarily always that. And some backstory is brought into the characters through the telling of these voiceovers, which I think voiceovers can be so cheap, and narration in general can be really, really cheap use of exposition. But the way that Malik uses it here, it feels very rich in art, right? And it feels tasteful rather than a cheap ploy to like move us forward in the plot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's another element too where he's using real letters that were really written by two real people to help shape this story.
Way.
Yeah. It's
Oh my gosh.
yeah. I to my knowledge, Malik based a lot of the script and especially at least the interactions between this man and this woman based on real letters that they corresponded with in real life. And that's really beautiful too. And so, yeah, you just, again, get more and more absorbed into this story that feels so unreal because it's, again, an impossible situation for someone to endure, but it really happened. And so, yeah, that narration becomes
Insane.
all the more powerful knowing that, like, a lot of these words were real words that were written and corresponded between these two real people. So, yeah, it's really powerful.
Gosh, that's so good. Wow. I had no idea. This is why I bring you on this phone call, is because I need some of this like random insight, you know? Okay, if we're going to move into the low notes of this film and kind of the things that don't work, for me personally, I feel like it's a masterful experience. So there's very few, if any. But I can at least speak for just what I believe that the average moviegoer. I like to filter some of these movies through what is my mom and dad, my boomer mom and dad going to think? And what's the average moviegoer going to think if they paid a ticket to go see a film like this? And I think that what we touched on early on is that it's too long. And, you know, to sit through this like cinematic experience for 3 hours sometimes can feel like a pretty National Geographic documentary, more so than this like an epic telling of a story, which is sometimes the point. And that it works for me, but I just know a general audience, this ain't gonna be bussin' at the box office, I'll tell you that. And then I think the last thing is knowing, and I would love for you to touch on this as well as some of the other stuff I just talked about, is just completely how self-indulgent people are gonna think that this film is. Just Malik at his most Malik-y Malikness, you know, like just incorporating everything that makes him him into this story. Sometimes it could potentially pull out of the story or mentally and emotionally. For me, I'm like, it's like you're walking through an art exhibit and this art is pertained to this artist. You know, when you see it, you know exactly like that's a Andy Warhol or that's a Picasso. And in the same way, when I step into this film, I'm feeling like, hey, this is a Malik and it's to be enjoyed, right? And I can kind of get past it. But, you know, it's going to totally come off as self-indulgent and take you out of it a little bit. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's the direction I'll go with this is, I don't know Terrence Malick. I've never spoken to him. But from everything I've seen and heard from others who are up close and personal with him, he just doesn't care like what other people think. And honestly, for me and probably you too, for those of us who like practice filmmaking as a craft, and who are immersed in it, and in some ways who do it vocationally and whose like livelihood in certain ways depends on creating things and creating films or videos in particular. It's really refreshing to see someone who could have had probably hundreds of opportunities to sell out and go direct massive big budget movies where he's giving up creative freedom to make a lot more money. But Terrence Malick, by all accounts, does not operate that way and is not interested in making films like that. And I mean, he made a couple of films early in his career and then like disappeared off the face of the planet for like decades. And he's just like an interesting cat. And I think.
Do you know the background behind that?
No, I don't know a ton.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah, I am refreshed by the fact that Malick is gonna Malick. For a lot of people, it annoys them and they don't like it. And like you said, they think it's like egotistical, self-centered, whatever you want to call it. But I just appreciate that Malick has never succumbed to the forces that be in Hollywood and has always just stayed true to, I'm going to make films that I want to make, how I want to make them, based on things that I'm interested in, themes that I think are worth exploring. And the artist in me is like, I love that. And the like business-minded person in me is like, man, you probably could have made like dozens more films and made hundreds of millions of more dollars, but that's, again, not what he's interested in. And yeah, Hidden Life, I don't think any part of Malick was making this film to set box office records, like, by no means. And
definitely not, because it was massive commercial failure that regard.
Which it's funny to me that, like, Fox Searchlight thought that it was going to be, like, anything different, but whatever. It doesn't matter. That's not what it's about. But, yeah, if you're going to look at the lowlights, it's, if I, like, try to watch this movie with my wife, she's going to be on her phone within 20 minutes and, like, totally tuned out. And that's okay. It's like it's not a film for everybody. And even me, I'm like, if I'm doing a rewatch, I'm probably gonna take a break halfway through and have a bite to eat and then jump back into it. But it's,
I had to do it in 2 sittings.
Yeah, that's okay. It's but again, it's not in defensive. I'm not trying to like defend Terrence Malick. Like you can, that's the beauty of art, is that like anytime you put something out into the world, like you have to be willing to welcome criticism. And I don't think Malick cares all that much. Like I think again, he just wants to make what he wants to make, how he wants to make it. And again, the artist in me is like refreshed by that and motivated by that. So
let's go. Same, dude. Same. I love seeing someone who is a shameless auteur, you know, and it makes me more confident to set this camera up and press record. Yeah. It makes me more confident to, you know, make a bold choice in my wedding filmmaking or storytelling in my personal videos with my family and all that stuff. Whenever I see people who just like have a big budget, have a story, and they'll just crush whatever they want to crush and accept a commercial failure rather than to just sell out and put some butts in the seats, you know?
Yeah, and for Malick in particular, based on what I know of him, having some sort of a faith and me having a faith, like I have to believe that plays a part in this too for him personally, that like he's not seeking his approval from box office numbers or from studio heads. Like again, he's trying to use his God-given talent and his brain that is able to produce these fascinating, beautiful films for a purpose that's bigger than just a number on a dotted line, which again I really respect. So
that's so good, man. I never really thought about that, but like when you think about media and films that are going to stand the test of time, like one of our favorite brands, a film preservation company, if you could call them that, the Criterion Collection, you know, sources some of the greatest films ever made and wants to print them in the highest quality, give them some amazing art, give the viewer insight, and then deliver like a premium product. And I think it says a lot that a lot of his discography has been picked up by Criterion, you know, and it shows that in the midst of being in the Hollywood era, or just the Hollywood, he's in Hollywood, in the midst of being that, he hasn't lost sight of who he is. He's stayed true to who he is as an auteur and just his style and his faith and the themes that he carries. They've just been present throughout all of his films, and it's people are taking notice of that. And I think that when you think back, if we're talking 50 years from now and we look back at some of the most impactful films. Like Malik's name is undoubtedly going to be brought up as films that have themes that are going to stand the test of time, you know.
I love that, and I think to even tie a bow on the hidden life idea, which you should read the quote after this thought.
Yes.
At the end of the movie, but I think that artists wrestle with things in their art that they're wrestling with personally, and I have to believe that based on everything we know about Terrence Malick and everything that we don't know about Terrence Malick, that this idea of having a hidden life that's meaningful is probably a really deeply, personally profound idea for him. That in so many ways, Terrence Malick lives a hidden life. Like he does not want to be
truly
captured in behind the scenes. He doesn't do interviews. Like he, by all
no
accounts,
interviews
lives
in 50
a
years.
hidden life. Yeah, and it's like, so no wonder Terrence Malick would be fascinated by a man who would go to his death for something that he believes so deeply in, all the while living a hidden life that and honestly, like if Terrence Malick had like never made this movie, or if there were never like books written about Franz and his wife and his life, like no way we would know who he is, or like no way we would know his story. So again, Malick is just fascinated clearly with this idea of like, what does it mean to live a quiet, hidden life? And I'm fascinated by that idea. And so that's probably one of the reasons I'm drawn to this film too, is like, man, what would it look like to live a profoundly, deeply meaningful life that's quiet and hidden and doesn't need to seek all this attention and praise? And you could probably make arguments in the favor of like false humility and like, dude, at least like do an interview. But yeah, I don't know. I respect Malick for that. And I think it's cool that,
an interview.
Yeah, I think it's cool that like in his art, you see what he's wrestling with in his life. And yeah, you just can't say that for every filmmaker. Thought. But I think the best filmmakers
That's so
do that.
smart.
Yeah.
Yes, dude. I couldn't even pull that out before that. Like that is him. Like at least in the Hollywood context, he is living the hidden life. Like with the type of skill and the storytelling technique that he has. I'll go ahead and read that George Eliot quote you brought up. It's what the film ends with. For the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and the things that are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs.
The quote that you just read, kind of tying a bow on the entire thing that Malick wrestles with through the entire film of, does it matter? Like if you live faithfully and you live truly, but it's hidden and it's quiet and it doesn't ripple out, like, does it matter? The quote is saying, of course it matters. Like that matters as much as anything to live faithfully and truly, even if it's hidden and quiet. So it's a beautiful movie that wrestles with really deep, profound ideas about, again, like I said, life, death, faith, morality, all of these really, really heady, deep concepts, but it does it in a really grounded, meek story that follows really grounded and meek people. So I think it's awesome. Again, like I've said, it's, I think, one of my favorite movies ever. Definitely not rewatchable, definitely really long, really slow. But yeah, really beautiful, and would highly recommend investing a few hours of your life into experiencing it. In the grand scheme of things, it's not all that much, but I think it's good for anybody watching this video to know what you're getting yourself into, to gear up for a long, slow film. But I just have a hard time. I guess there's people that would probably watch it and regret it, but I have a hard time believing that most folks who dedicate the time and energy to it and like put their phones away for it will come away being like, oh, I regret spending those 3 hours on that. So yeah, it's an awesome film from an awesome filmmaker that I respect a lot.
Let's go. What's your score?
Oh man, I'd probably give it like a 4.7, like 4.75. It's not a 5 out of 5. Not my favorite movie ever. Again, probably points taken off there for it being really long and really slow and hard to rewatch. But it's amazing. It's an amazing movie.
Well, then, building off of that, my score will be, I guess, controversial, but I'm a little more liberally leaning when it comes to handing out 5 stars, but I give it a 5-star. I thought it was a masterpiece, man. I'm like, yes, there are flaws and all. This is a masterpiece, and it's a film that's going to stand the test of time, one that's, okay, not rewatchable like every year for me, but one that I'm absolutely recommending to family members and that I will be showing my kids one day when they're teenagers and can comprehend and understand art and understand this high concept. And yeah, I think it's definitely solidified itself as maybe my favorite Christian film of all time to this date, which I'm only about 15 titles in or so. But it's made my like top 20 films of all time for sure. And it's leaving me like, it left a big impact on me emotionally, and left a big impact on me philosophically. It makes me think and wonder what would I do in the context of Franz's situation. So masterfully done, flaws and all. It's a masterpiece. It's one that I will recommend to so many moving forward. I'm super thankful that you got to join me for this discourse. I think you added a ton of value,
Dude,
Logan.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
Super fun.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I think that's it. Do you have any last things that you want to say to the camera, just in regards of Terrence or
Nah,
the
just
film? Perfect.
Spend $3.50 and go rent it and watch it.
Let's go. Or
Criterion Collection.
Yeah, I guess I was gonna pub the Criterion, but I don't think Criterion is actually publishing A Hidden Life. I looked it up before I went and bought the film at my local movie trading co. to watch it. Like,
Love it.
Which is insane. But yeah, that's pretty much it for A Hidden Life. Super thankful if you actually made it this far into the video. Let us know what you think about A Hidden Life and Terrence Malick, his discography in general, and see you soon.